Hi, my name is Megan Kennett. For my Pechakucha, I chose to look at the educational inequities among students with low socioeconomic status. I chose this topic because we have many students who fall into this category in my current setting. I wanted to research the impact of low SES and how we can create more equitable learning environments. When students are bullied or ostracized by peers based on their SES, there's an imbalance of power that creates an equity dilemma. Students being bullied suffer impacts on their mental health, which impact their academic outcomes. These students are not being provided a safe and equitable learning environment. In addition to social impacts, students with low SES typically struggle academically. One dilemma around academic equity is regarding homework. Parents may not be able to afford a device or internet at home, which in some cases is a requirement to complete the homework. Without the necessary resources, students with low SES are not being provided access to the learning. One ethical dilemma here is that teachers have lower expectations for students with low SES. Many times it's assumed that if students are low SES, they are not as capable of meeting expectations as their middle upper class peers. This is an unfair assumption, as educators we know that all students are capable of learning at high levels. This dilemma relates to a few standards from the Code of Ethics, including advocating for adequate resources and facilities to ensure equitable learning for all, working to engage the school community to close achievement, opportunity, and attainment gaps. An equitable outcome for this dilemma would be for schools to do what they can to promote inclusiveness and acceptance. It is important for schools to have an effective anti-bullying policy and practice. Additionally, schools can provide assistance to students of low SES or connect them with outside resources to address their individual needs. If schools could provide technology for students to use at home, this would create a more equitable access. Another solution would be provide all students with a study hall and eliminate homework altogether. I work in a school district that has many students of low SES, and I have seen the inequities that they face regarding their social and academic outcomes. I've witnessed teachers having lower expectations for this group of students and have seen the way they are treated differently because their clothes or shoes may not be new or popular brands. This causes anxiety and depression in students and takes the focus off of learning. One perspective behind the inequities for students with low SES involves teacher expectations. Spayberg and others in 2012 found that in general, teachers have lower expectations for children from lower SES backgrounds. The lower expectations teachers have for students sometimes come from subjective information, which can be damaging for student outcomes. This perspective could be challenged in that the research on teacher expectations and student outcomes is limited and difficult to document. According to Gershenson 2022, this is due to the fact that teacher expectations and student outcomes are likely influenced by factors that researchers are unable to observe. In her TED Talk, Candace Sumner describes one perspective on why low-income students are underperforming higher-income students. She refers to an education debt instead of an achievement gap, and because the issue lies with the inequity of resources and opportunities for low-income students. An important factor when considering education debt is state funding to obtain student resources. States vary significantly on the distribution of funds for our schools. According to Kratz 2023, Iowa falls into the category of average funding level and less funding equity. This clearly demonstrates that funding could be distributed differently to promote equity for all students. I believe professional development on intersectionality would be important for educators to make progress toward equitable outcomes for students with low SES. Many times when people think of inequity, they think about race, which is fair. However, many students fall under multiple breast categories and they experience further oppression and inequity. To address the issue that teachers generally have lower expectations for students with low socioeconomic status, additional training on implicit bias could be helpful. Teachers may not recognize that their bias and how it affects students and their educational outcomes. The National Education Association offers resources to provide training to educators on identifying and reducing implicit bias in schools. In addition, the University of Connecticut has some great information about intersectionality in the classroom, including a supplemental video. I think the most important influence as an individual educator would be in the area of advocating for student resources. It is critical that students are taught using rigorous curriculum and that all students have access. Many times I believe it's left to the teacher to advocate for these resources. Another important action that individuals must take is to get out and vote on educational issues. A high priority for educators is school funding, and it's important to stay current and informed on this legislation so we can help get students the resources they need. At the school or district level, I think important steps would be to try to identify and have resources in place for students in need. For example, in my school building, different team members collect donations of shoes, clothing, snacks, and other things students may not be able to afford. Another action schools can take is providing technology resources at home for families where this is not feasible in order to provide equitable access to learning. Martin and colleagues in 2018 described some funding related steps for states to consider. School funding systems should ensure equal access to core educational services. School funding should provide significant additional resources for low income students, and education and child welfare programs should be fully funded. In conclusion, there must be action taken to address the inequity among students with low socioeconomic status. As educators, we must ensure an equitable school environment and system so all students have the opportunity to succeed. If we don't address this inequity, our disadvantaged students will be left behind.